Hi everyone and welcome to our September Homewijn virtual tasting, once again coming to you straight from Wijn. This month we've gone with the Breaking Bud theme because it's the changing of the seasons, the buds on the vines are busy coming out. And we decided to put a lighter selection of wines together, moving into spring and the changing of seasons. So this month in your Homewijn selection, you would have found what we think is quite an interesting selection of Chardonnay and Cinsault, as well as blends of those cultivars. And in keeping with the lighter side of things, we've decided to also host this month's tasting ourselves and not necessarily get a winemaker to do it. So next to me, I have my business partner and also husband, Dries. Welcome to this virtual tasting. And maybe before we get into the wines, tell us a little bit about how you became interested in wine and maybe when you first started collecting wine.
Okay. Yes, thank you for having me. This is a lovely Friday. Usually spent at work, today spent in Wijn. I'm really excited to be here. So, just to disclose, I'm not a winemaker. I'm a wine lover, definitely. So the amount that we've consumed over the last few years, and especially in lockdown a little bit more, I think really qualifies us to be at least experts in what good wine tastes like. And we thought this month to have a nice selection, and I'm glad. Initially we thought spring, so only white wines, but if you stay anywhere close to the Western Cape, you'll know that it's we've even had snow this supposedly spring month. So I think it's a nice selection of different wines, and definitely speaks to both our palates. We are passionate Chardonnay drinkers. A lot of people don't like Chardonnay because it's just overwooded, overworked. But I think in this selection you'll find that even the one Chardonnay was aged for 22 months, so nearly 2 years in oak. Not new oak, but still there was wood on it, and you can't taste it, it just adds complexity. So I think a very nice selection, and I'm very excited to start tasting.
But before we get to that, you got me interested in wine, really. So talk to us about when you first started collecting wine and how your appreciation for wine really started.
So grew up in a house full of wine drinkers, so just continuing the tradition. So my mom's side of the family are farmers, specifically grape farmers in Paarl, and part of KWV and Simon's Vlei, the co-ops, and grew up in a house where we had a KWV quota, which anyone that's also either close to or on the wrong side of 40 would know that growing up that was something to have. So drank a Ruderberg in our house, and that was very fancy. So appreciation for wine, obviously seeing it from the grape to the end product, and then started my first, I would say, collection wines were 1998 to 1999 KWV Cabernets, and I still remember buying them. I was visiting my grandfather on my matric holiday, and drove around, tasted, had a boot full of wine, and unfortunately I drank all of them quite soon after collecting it, because it would have been lovely to have had some of them still to taste today.
So getting to this month's collection, the first wine in your box, and which we've chosen to drink first, is the Passerine Elements range Bright, which is 100% Chardonnay, made from grapes on their Elgin and Franschhoek properties. And you've had in your previous Homewijn selections, we also had some of the Passerine Elements range. The Midnight was in one of your previous boxes, and this month the Chardonnay. So the winemaker Martin Smith, as we know, spent quite a bit of time at Villafonte as their winemaker before he started Passerine with a business partner a couple of years ago. So talk to us a little bit about this Chardonnay and what you get on the nose and on the palate.
So I have to disclose, I think this is a lovely wine. So Martin makes a lovely Chardonnay. He started with his own Passerine range, which is a lot higher end price point, more oak on it than what this one has. But I just think this is a lovely example of Chardonnay. It's got the fruitiness, but it also has a base layer just of complexity that keeps your palate your tongue not just occupied at the front where you get the fruit, but also at the back of your tongue where you just get that little bit of acidity, bit of liminess to it. So I think this is a great wine. It's a good wine to start the day with, depending how early you can start enjoying your wine, and obviously serve it chilled. I think this is lovely. This will convince any non-Chardonnay drinker that Chardonnay is a good option to have. So it's a good balanced wine, not just a Chardonnay. So I like it. What do you get on the palate?
It's got some beautiful minerality to it as well, which I think is probably a good indication of Chardonnay, where you get the fruitiness but also the underlying minerality on it. And I think between the Algan, which is a cooler climate area, and Franschhoek, which is warmer, the grapes also have different
good
characteristics,
blend,
and it's a good blend of the two. I think.
To me, it's got a bit of pear on the nose, and that's it just, I like it. It's a nice and fruity wine, easy to drink. I would definitely have another bottle of it.
Yeah, great. So the Passerine element's bright, and as Dries said, Passerine also has their signature range, which he also makes 100% Chardonnay, Passerine's Chardonnay. So if you're a Chardonnay fan, we are both big fans of the high-end Chardonnay, and it's definitely worth your while to come and taste it here at Wijn, or just go all out and buy a bottle. Great, so our next wine on the lineup, also a Franschhoek winery called Stony Brook, family owned by the McNaught family, and Stony Brook was one of our first discoveries as a wine producer in Franschhoek when we started wine touring in Franschhoek and discovering the Franschhoek area. I think probably now about 10, 12 years ago. And I still remember us, taking that road out Franschhoek and seeing the sign Stony Brook, and we decided that we're going to go in there. And we didn't have an appointment for a tasting. We arrived there, and it was one of the best experiences because I think we didn't have any expectation, and every single wine that we tasted was absolutely exceptional. The tasting was facilitated by one of the family members, and I think probably close to home for you is that it's owned by someone that was also in the medical field and then decided to buy a wine farm, which I think also talks to your dream probably in life.
So the McNaught family, come to know them quite well. So Nigel was a GP, so general practitioner in the Eastern Cape, and in the 90s they decided to relocate to Franschhoek. It was an old fruit farm initially, and now it's a winery that makes estate wine, so meaning that they grow all the grapes on the plot itself, and they make lovely wines. They've got a very wide range. And this Ghost Gum is a nice example of what you can do blending Chardonnay. So just to add a little bit of depth to the fruitiness of the Chardonnay. So this is a Semillon Chardonnay. So the Semillon is, it adds a butteriness on the palate that without taking away the fruit. So why people used to have a lot of oak on their Chardonnays was to get that butteriness, the roundedness on your palate, but it used to take away the fruitiness. Whereas a blend like this, actually, it gives the mouth feel, but it doesn't subtract any of the fruit. I think it's Nigel and the whole family, they're all involved. Yeah, and it's well worth a visit if you're ever in France. You're a little bit off the beaten track. So if you get to the monument, don't turn left up the hill, but turn right and you'll drive past. And I think it's well worth a visit to taste the whole range, really.
Yeah. So interesting for me, because I almost get the greeness of the Semillon on the nose,
Definitely.
which is really interesting because it's a very low percentage Semillon. So you would think that the Chardonnay dominates on the nose, but I get a lot of the greeness of the Semillon.
So Semillon in Afrikaans is called the groendruif, and it definitely adds that.
Yeah, I mean, comparing the two is so interesting. I mean, obviously the first one, the bright, is 100% Chardonnay.
Yes.
From two different areas, where this one, Franschhoek Chardonnay, but blended with a little bit Semillon, and it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's completely different. I wouldn't even say, tasting this, that the Chardonnay grapes come from the same area.
Yeah, definitely. It gives you a little bit of acidity on the sides of your tongue, and it keeps your palate interested. And definitely with food, I think any fish. Probably even a light curry, not too hot, obviously, butter chicken, exactly. Yeah, so that would go very well with this salmon. So anything that can handle the acidity. So therefore, something again that coats your mouth from an oily type of fish would go lovely with this. Can you age this? Probably. I think it probably has a bit of aging potential. But yeah, if it's in the fridge, I'm going to drink it right now.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about this Chardonnay is it is a lot lighter and a lot greener. Yeah. So I think for someone that doesn't necessarily love Chardonnay that much, I think this will probably be a lot more approachable than a typical 100% Chardonnay.
Yes. No, definitely. Yeah. And obviously, if we haven't said it yet, obviously serve it chilled, all these wines. And yes, I think so. I agree with that.
Great.
Cool.
So moving on to our next Chardonnay, which I must say was definitely the discovery for me of this month's case, the Prime Spot Chardonnay. It was made, as we said in the Homewijn leaflet, by the winemaker from Laibach, Francois. Francois came in here the other day and he brought us a new Chenin Blanc that he made from Laibach, and he mentioned as a side comment, I've got my own little label, Prime Spot, where I make a Chardonnay and a Cinsault driven red. Would you like to taste it? And I said to him, well, yes, definitely. And he brought the wines and we opened them up, and the Chardonnay is just exceptional.
Yeah, this is
absolutely exceptional. So this was the discovery for me, and I think at an amazing price point, which I think all of the wines in the box this month, really exceptional quality, but also exceptional price.
Value for money, definitely. So what makes this one, the Chardonnay, again different from the other ones, are that it was again aged in oak. It is a combination of Stellenbosch as well as Robertson grapes. And the lime soil in Robertson gives a very unique flavor. Anyone who's had David Nieuwoud's wines from that part, from the Robertson, the Chardonnays, will agree that it just adds a different complexity to the wine. I have to disclose, this is I really like this Chardonnay. It's easy drinking, but it's also complex. To me, a perfect example of what a Chardonnay should taste like. Francois is known as the winemaker of Laibach, and they tend to make heavier wines, so Merlot driven, as we'll taste later on with his red blend. But I think he can stick with Chardonnay if this is what it ends up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And Prime Spot, it is a perfect name. I think, as we're seeing with a lot of the new world winemakers, they really spend a lot of their time to find vineyards that grow in prime spots, or site-specific wines, as it's called. which really display the characteristics of that specific area, and where the terroir really drives the flavor profile of this specific wine. And I think this Chardonnay, as you said, with the limestone from Robertson and the clay soils from Stellenbosch, almost gets that balance of flavor for the minerality, but also the fruitiness.
Yeah, the trend definitely from the winemakers is you don't need to own a farm. Ideally, you don't want to own a farm. You want to own blocks of different vineyards on different farms, because then you can pick, you nitpick whatever you think is the best grapes for your style of wine. Yes, and I think got it spot on. Yeah, there's not a lot to say about this wine. so I think if you have this one next to the Bright, they're lots more similar in characteristics, but the Prime Spot is just that slightly heavier, a little bit more complex. But in style, the three ones, the Stony Brook with the Semillon is a little bit more the outlier, whereas they are both examples of what a Chardonnay should taste like.
Absolutely. Great.
I'm not going to decant this one. Don't get the opportunity often on a Friday, let's call it late afternoon, to have some wine, so I'll enjoy that. Okay, so on to the red wines then.
Yes, and as we move on to the red, we've got JJ and Barry back from Gauteng, who did the Homewijn deliveries with the personal delivery this month. So what did you guys think of Gauteng?
It was quite exciting at first, but after we in Joburg, like I want to go home now. Like it's not so fast in mind, but I see like streets in mind of park. Like it looks like we're driving in the main road now. But it was quite nice to drive just to be there. And just like to personally deliver, to see our customers personally, to meet them.
Wonderful. That was good. Yeah, so everyone tasting this box, it was hand delivered by these two guys, and literally just arrived. So it was a 5-day trip of driving, many thousands of kilometers, but we're glad that everyone got their Wijn boxes. And thanks guys.
I mean, for us it was having all of you as Homewijn subscribers really means a lot to us as a business, and part of delivering Wijn to you is delivering a personal service. So it was really great for us to send JJ and Barry up to Gauteng, that usually does our deliveries in Cape Town and also serves customers in Wijn here in Paarl, so that you guys in Gauteng can meet them face to face. So we hope that you enjoyed meeting our two barmen from Wijn. And thank you guys for driving all the way up to Gauteng and fending off the traffic in Joburg. We hope you enjoyed it.
And everyone has to come and taste their cocktails of the week. The two of them make a mean cocktail here at Wijn Bar.
Cool. Great. Okay, so then moving on to the red wines, which all three of them are Cinsault driven. So the first one, the Katzesnoor, which is a 100% Cinsault made by Gerard Smith, which is the winemaker of creation in Hemel en Aarde. And the Katzesnoor is his personal label. And I said in the info sheet, the name is after his grandfather, which is Opa Kat, that had a mean mustache, and that's why it's called the Katzesnoor. So he makes 4 different wines in his range, all extremely limited production. So of the 2019 and 16 vintages, there was only 1 barrel produced of each. He makes the Cinsault, he makes a Chardonnay from Hemel en Aarde. He makes a Sauvignon Blanc, and then he also makes a Pinot Noir, also from Hemel en Aarde. So in this month's box, you've got the Cinsault, which is grapes from Welgelegen Farm in Stellenbosch. And I think if you look at the color, I mean, Cinsault obviously is usually quite light in color, but this one is a little bit darker than a lot of Cinsaults. And you also get darker notes on the nose and the palate, which I personally enjoy because I'm not a massive fan of a very light Cinsault, and this one has very nice complexity to it still.
Well, the complexity comes from being old vines. So Cinsault is a is an interesting grape in the sense that it was widely planted in the 70s and 80s in South Africa, and literally all the big name wines that we made in those days, most of them had a bit of Cinsault in, even if it wasn't disclosed on the label. And it fell out of favor. People, they pulled out all the Cinsaults and started planting all the other more French varietals, and luckily a few of the old blocks stayed behind, and it was rediscovered in essence in the last few years. And honestly, the Cinsaults we are producing at the moment are beautiful. It usually would be lower quantities just because of the old vines, so the old vines add complexity, but unfortunately the downside is the yield per hectare is a lot less. So it also tends to be more labor intensive, to be a little bit more expensive, but honestly well worth it. So Cinsault is especially from the Swartland is widely used, but there are a few old blocks in Stellenbosch, and this is a prime example of that. So anyone who knows creation knows that their Chardonnay and their Pinot Noir definitely are the grapes or the varietals that they are more known for. But luckily, Gerard is able to make these small barrels of parcels of wine, and yes, what a treat! And literally so limited. I don't know of any other place you can get them, and there aren't many. So if you like it, I think order because we're going to run out at some stage. And good example of what a Cinsault should taste like.
Yeah, and I chatted to Gerard in the week. So he just received some very high accolades for his Pinot Noir, and we will be hosting a tasting with Gerard in the coming weeks here at Wijn for his Katzesnoor range, and probably some of his creation wines as well.
Okay, nice.
So keep a lookout. We'll send you an email and also post it on our social channels, but I think that will definitely be a really amazing tasting to attend.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So what do you get on the nose with this Cinsault?
Well, it has a fruitiness on the nose, but again at the back of your palate it has this earthiness. And what you would usually more describe with the Pinot Noir, but...
yeah, that's what I was about to say. So I would almost struggle to pick this specifically if I had a couple of Pinot Noirs and this Cinsault thrown into a blind tasting.
No,
I would come
definitely.
very close to picking this as a Pinot Noir because it's got those earthy undertones which you usually get on a Pinot Noir, and I think you're right, it comes from the old vine.
Yeah. The one thing that I would say that if you had to pick why this would be a Cinsault is it has it's a little bit more fruit forward. But yes, definitely the undertones of a Pinot Noir, so I agree with you. It would be an interesting one in a blind tasting to throw in there. Yeah, what a lovely wine. And again, the nice thing about the older Cinsaults is you can dress it up or you can dress it down in essence. So you can have it during the day. It's light enough to have during the day, maybe even chill it slightly. But it's got enough to it that you can have it with food, pasta dishes.
So I mean, this wine now, for the tasting that we're doing now, we didn't chill at all.
No.
It's fairly cool outside, but I wouldn't chill it much more than it is now, which is a cool room temperature.
Yeah, about 17 degrees or so.
Because it has those underlying sort of earthy tones and a little bit of tannins coming through.
Definitely.
So this is not your typical very light style Cinsault, which is best served chilled.
Yeah, no, definitely not. No, don't chill it, but you just cool it slightly.
Cool room temperature.
Definitely.
Great. So moving on to our next one, which is a Shiraz Cinsault blend from Maras. Martin Lamprecht, who makes wine out of the Swartland and gets his grapes predominantly from Swartland and Pekingese Kloof. Shiraz Cinsault blend. So this one, as Martin says himself, is best served chilled.
Yes.
So, I mean, Martin, I think the brand of Maras is much more of a playful type of brand. but there's almost an antithesis there because it's a playful brand at a very good price point, but he makes some serious wines.
No, he does.
So none of his wines are light and playful. It's a playful brand, but it's some really serious wines.
Yeah, so the playfulness, fits with his personality. But, David Nieuwoud won't partner with someone if they're not a serious winemaker. And he's got a wide range. And this is it's that one of those in-between wines where if you drink it when it's slightly warmer, it has a lot of tannins to it. It's quite a heavy wine that comes from the Shiraz then. But the moment you chill it down a bit, you just lose the tannins, but the fruit comes a bit forward.
Yeah.
So I would drink it about 14 degrees. Not cooler than that. Definitely don't, don't throw ice in it, but just cool it down a little bit, and it just brings out the fruit. And again, then it's a interesting wine, but also complex enough to pair with food. And again, a nice, just transition to a heavier wine, which we're also doing today. So the last wine being, a lot more tannin structures, a lot heavier, whereas this is a nice, pure Cinsault, lighter style in between, and then the rest.
Yeah, it's almost the perfect lineup if you have friends over for a braai. To start with the Katzesnor Cinsault, which is serious but still a lighter Cinsault, and then move on to the Maras, which you almost serve with your plankie steak.
Yes,
as a starter.
Yes, for sure.
And then moving on to the Tignes, which is a heavier style.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Cinsault is an interesting addition to Shiraz because Shiraz usually can be quite intense and very peppery and heavy fruit, where the Cinsault almost lifts it up a little bit
tones
it down and it lifts it a little bit. So you get those lovely almost rose water
definitely
on the nose, which I think comes from the Cinsault more.
Yeah.
But then on the palate, you can taste it's a Shiraz, but it almost mellows it down a little bit, but it's a lot more drinkable. So I think for someone that likes a more serious red wine, but is not a big Shiraz drinker because it's usually too spicy and too intense, this is a good wine because it softens it a little bit and it makes it more approachable, definitely.
No, I think it plays to both crowds, whether you're into heavy stuff or whether you prefer your lighter style white wines only. This would work for anyone. Good price point, good wine. What's more to say?
Yeah, and again, if things go well, we will probably have Martin and David Nieuwoud as a duo together at Wijn soon to come and present a tasting of Maras, but also of David's range.
Cool.
Good. So moving on to our last wine. I'm not going to get rid of this one. It actually drinks really well this morning because it's a little bit cooler.
This afternoon, you mean?
This afternoon, yes.
That's why we call it the Winelands.
So, our last wine is the Prime Spot. This is the second wine in the range of Francois from Laibach, Prime Spot Red, which he calls the Tignes. And I asked him to tell me the story of why it's called the Tignes, and he said, well, you would have to come for a couple of glasses of wine to tell me because it's a long story.
Okay.
So Francois, we will have you over for a couple of glasses of wine and you will tell us the long story of why it's called Tignes, and we will definitely then share that with you as well.
Yes.
But the Tignes, for me, a really interesting blend because it's predominantly Cinsault.
Yes.
64% Cinsault, and then blended with Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. So a really interesting blend because usually you get Cab or Merlot as the predominant varietal, and then Cinsault is the blending agent.
Exactly.
Almost.
That softens it a bit, adds the fruitiness. Whereas, but again, in a blind tasting, I would be really pressed to say that this is a predominantly Cinsault wine. Just because it's such a big wine. I also think this wine has aging potential. You could well, if you have the the correct cellaring or storage facility temperature wise, I think this one can lie a little bit and just to let the tannins settle a little bit. But again, if you have it now, this is a wine that you can go all out. A big proper piece of steak. The tannins would definitely go well with that. And just again, it's an interesting wine, and that's the beauty of the Homewijn to me personally. So every month we sit and we chat. Okay, what are we having this month? What's the focus or the theme for this month? And I just think this is one of those wines where, me personally, I would never have tasted this. I would,
No.
You wouldn't even know about this. And luckily Francois came along, and I think it's an interesting wine. Whether it's going to be your favorite wine doesn't matter. It just, it's an interesting wine, and that's the whole idea of this, is to just broaden your palate, broaden your experience, and every wine experience is an experience that you've had. That's just adds to the magic of wine in essence.
Yeah, it's interesting, because if you smell this and you taste it, what would you say dominates?
Well, I would think of the Merlot. It would be either the Merlot or the Cab. But definitely not the Cinsault, and it's 64% Cinsault, so it's a whole lot of Cinsault in there. But yeah, if I have to be pressed, I would say the Merlot most likely. So Francois spent time in Pomerol, and anyone who knows anything about the right bank of Bordeaux, that's where Petrus, all the really famous right bank Bordeaux blends are made. So Petrus is 100% Merlot. It's one of the most expensive wines in the world, and so anyone who spent time there knows what to do with the Merlot. So again, the Merlot just softens the tannin. It adds a fruitiness, but it doesn't take away from the complexity of the wine.
Absolutely.
So it would have been interesting to taste this as a 64% Cinsault and then a 36% Cab, versus toning that down to a 15% Merlot. And I think the Merlot just adds an approachability to the wine that makes it easier to drink now, versus if it was only the two, probably you would have definitely have had to let it age a bit before it would have been approachable.
Yeah, and I mean, Francois really is known for his Merlot. The clay pot Merlot from Laibach is exceptional. We also
Lovely
stock
wine.
it.
Yeah.
And we will definitely feature it again on International Merlot Day, which is in November, which we're hosting with the Merlot Association of South Africa. So I think last year when we hosted that event for International Merlot Day, the clay pot Merlot was definitely, I think for us, but also everyone that came to Wijn for that event, it was one of the top Merlots and one of the top discoveries probably. Yes. So even if you're not a Merlot drinker and really a lover of Merlot, that's a wine which is worthwhile to test and to drink.
But again, Merlot is kind of like Pinotage, so forgive me for saying that, in the sense that a lot of people feel that they have to make, wineries feel that they have to make a Merlot because people like to drink Merlot. Same with Pinotage, and not all wineries are suited, so the terroir is not always suited for it. So Merlot is a lovely wine. Merlot is a lovely grape to work with, and that is a prime example. So if you're a lover of wine, try that. Try a few of the serious Merlots. Obviously you're not going to be disappointed. So, but we're digressing. The prime spot. Yeah, interesting wine. I think. Well worth the taste.
Yeah, I mean, for me, definitely, it's a wine which I think in your Homewijn box, open it, taste it, maybe drink a glass, put it back, try it again tomorrow and the day after, because I think it would be really interesting to try it once it opens up a little bit, and then I think buy a couple of bottles to leave in your cellar and try over a couple of years' time. A beautiful wine. And on that note, thank you very much for Dries to joining our
lovely.
September Homewijn virtual tasting. It's really been a privilege to taste these wines with you. All of these wines you can buy online at Wijn, wijnbar.co.za. If you are a Homewijn subscriber, you buy at 10% below cellar door price all of these wines. And please also follow us on social media, on Instagram and on Facebook, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel, which we have only really just started, but we are really working hard to bring interesting wine content to you. So see you next month for flowering.
Good. Cheers.
Cheers.